Hey, prog nerds and those hoping to achieve prog nerd status. I am Dave. This is Bleeding Edge. Welcome to the show. Thank you for joining me. Yeah, I know. Some of you recently heard me say I wasn't going to be doing interviews much anymore. And yet, here I am already. Hey, you never know when the unexpected is going to happen. And with my next guest, the unexpected is usually what you get. So, to find out the latest about the self-proclaimed post-apocalyptic troubadour himself, the one and only, the always entertaining and always unpredictable Jason Bieler, stick around as we chat about his latest album due out February 21st, that is The Escapologist. Coming right up. Well, it's good to see you again, my friend. Thank you for joining. I appreciate it. So it's been a busy few months. I'm a grandfather now. I'm going to brag about that a little bit.
Congratulations.
Yeah. It's one of those moments that it's causing a great deal of cognitive distortion for me because, and there we go. Now we got some lights on the subject, because it means I've got to accept that I'm not 25.
What is this you're speaking of? That's just can't be the case.
I know. Yeah, I know. It's like one of those things that was always a possibility in the future, but you know, when it comes to past, you're still going, wait a minute, already?
Well, it's like when you walk into a show now or something like that, and someone comes and goes, "Excuse me, mister." You're like, "What?"
Yeah, I get you. I hear you. So, hey, all right. So we've got stuff going on for you, of course. Glad you're here to talk about it. So, and also I'm going to test my brain. The Escapologist.
Yes, very well done.
Yeah. You gave me a new word to learn, new vocabulary. And that's coming out the 21st, is it not?
Yep.
26th of February.
Single comes out tomorrow, and the album's out 21st.
Excellent. Very, very cool. Now, you, of course, have been dribbling out singles for the album for a while, like you did last album. Like they just kind of come out as they come out. So we've been getting little brief previews along the way for some time now, which is very cool. I like that. Keeps you in the public eye. But in the end, when you think about it, it's maybe not even a year and a half since the last album came out. So that means you've been a very productive young lad. And I'm curious.
Strangely enough, I actually wanted to release this record about 2 or 3 months ago, but I got yelled at by Roy. He's like, "You can't release a record at the very end of the year. It's going to be last year's record the first week of the year." And I was like, so it's been the most painful experience, not releasing it sooner.
Fair enough. It's kind of once you're ready to go and you've got to hold off and you've got the anticipation of, I want to do it. Very cool.
Well, hurting my life.
I guess his rationale is rather wise. I guess I can't disagree with him.
The all-knowing, all-seeing Roy.
Now, unless you want to tag like a Christmas song on it, which you've got one out there you could do.
We do.
That I enjoy quite a bit, and just say, hey, Jason Bieler's Christmas album.
Next year, maybe.
Yeah. But it does seem you're getting more efficient. So I'm curious, to what do you attribute that? What's been going on in your life during that time that maybe has helped you speed up?
I don't really, I'm always writing. So there's literally hundreds and hundreds of songs in some state of, assembly, always going around, and there's always writing. So it's really always moving forward. And, I could literally be releasing records every 3 months. If that's, what I want to do. But I also think, I think people need, I find myself extremely palatable, but I assume people need a little bit more time to digest things, and you don't want to overburden people with too much to think about too soon. And, people are just waking up, I'm still getting people just discovering the whole thing.
Yeah.
So, I think I'm like a restaurant that keeps serving you food before you finish the first thing on your plate.
Well, and that's not necessarily the worst thing, depending on who you are. But it's funny because I look back in the olden days, as we like to call them, 70s, and people were putting out an album like annually. I don't even know how they kept up the pace, but a lot of artists were doing that annually almost.
I'm lucky. My day usually entails waking up, coffee, and heading to the studio. So, I'm always, that's my, I love doing that. It's where I spend most of my time and energies. So, I would be doing more. But it's been an interesting arc. I mean, I feel like we were actually building something cool here. And,
Right.
you know, as a well-seasoned veteran of the music wars, I'm lucky, because I think I feel in many ways like I've been rediscovered by a whole new group of people and
Indeed.
a whole new audience. And, most don't get that opportunity,
Yeah.
So it's been this, it's been unbelievably rewarding. And at the same point, like you were kind of alluding to when we started the conversation, I mean, I still feel like I have 100% of my faculties and I'm still young and all that, but you start to become progressively aware of the end zone in the distance, where that was never there. So, you start to think like, I want to accomplish all these things. I want to get all this music out. It starts to become more of a like, I don't want to waste this day.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Yeah, I hear you. That's crept up in my mind as well, as we noted. I'm not the youngest person, and certainly not the age I like to think I am. But as one gets older, that kind of idea of mortality creeps in ever more.
No, don't get me wrong. I'm immortal. I just mean.
Well, fair enough. All right. Well, then I am jealous. Maybe. I've heard there are burdens to immortality.
The way the world has been going the last few years, I don't know if it's something worth hanging out that long for.
Yeah, really. So I'm curious too. I mean, as all these things have been coming out, what has been on your mind? What have you been drawing upon for inspiration for this set of songs compared to maybe last time? Or is it just sort of whatever pops into your head on a given day?
I really feel like a passenger.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of, not it's not a spiritual thing. It's not a, I don't rub crystals on my head or something. But I just feel like there's this other thing going on, and my main job is to just get out of my way, and let those things happen. So, like, I mean, 80% of the lyrical content is stream of thought, and then I'll go back and I'll be like, oh, I could fix that, or I could fix this, and it all tends to come at one time,
right?
And I keep using the analogy. It's like I'm tuning in a radio station off in the distance, and there's, and all of a sudden I hear it, and I'm like, okay, I got to get this down. And so I tend to hear the music and the words and the general ideas all at the same time. And I've been lucky, so I don't want to question it or think about it,
Sure,
or want to know why it's been that way for me. I'm very lucky, but it's been like an old friend. Every time I turn to it, it's always been there. And knock on wood, always been there.
That's amazing, and we're the beneficiaries of it. So.
Oh.
It's interesting when you talk about finding a new audience as well, and you talk about how your process seems to have been very consistent overall, in that it's just coming out. And in many ways, that's an amazing thing, that it seems you would have done what I guess would be almost a contradiction in thought. You have sort of reinvented yourself, in essence, by being true to yourself. That in doing this, you found a new audience that you may not have expected to begin with. And yet I'm like, do you perceive yourself as having changed in that way as an artist?
No, I feel like someone who's sitting here going, what the hell took everybody so long?
Fair enough.
It could have been, I mean, I'm very grateful, but it would have been fantastic in my 20s or 30s as well. I wouldn't.
Sure.
But I think, I mean, what I've done and what I think I've always done, is obviously sprinkled in with a couple of fortunate radio hits or things like that. But it's always been a fairly diverse, very genre bastardizing thing. And I think the things that made that less digestible for people maybe early on or in the 90s has made it have a shelf life, and have, I still have people finding records, and I get messages like, oh, I just heard this record. I'm like, I had no idea that was, or this or that. Yeah. So it's taken a while. And obviously I'm not talking about stratospheric Taylor Swift levels of, but it's been very rewarding to kind of like, I do what I do, for better or worse. And it feels like, it's always rewarding when people start to go like, no, this makes sense now. Like I get this, I was just talking to somebody. I said, I have the opposite curse of every artist I know where, they have success and they have to repeat that way. And the people that have embraced me would crucify me if I did the same thing. Like they want to be thrown off the horse. They wanted like, what the hell was that? I had no idea you were going to do that. And that's become part of but that's so freeing creatively, like without having to sit there and go like, I need to write another Back in Black. How am I going to ever do that? Like, I'm sure the guys in AC/DC could write a great country song, or maybe they have a jazz riff, but their bass. And there's a beauty to always knowing what you're getting when you're going to an AC/DC show. I don't mean to in any way degrade the greatness of that band. Yeah. But I'm just saying it's really freeing to go like, no, I feel, I've listened to this Celtic ambient yak farmer. I'm going to bring that into my next record. My bass would be like, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, and thus the burden of expectation, that if you form this idea that you're going to do a certain thing, you're right. You got to repeat. And, for those of us as listeners as well, it honestly kind of helps us because, if we can basically figure whatever Jason's coming out with next could be entirely different from what he's done before. Okay, great. Then I don't sit back and go, oh, gee, I want him to sound like this.
Right. And that's, like I said, that's super freeing. I'd imagine it'd be super freeing for anybody. Like, if you made a Marvel movie and then you wanted to make a romantic comedy, but you're the director that does superhero stuff.
Yeah.
It's got to box a lot of in many ways boxes people in, but like I said, I feel pretty lucky about this.
Yeah. So interesting note too. One thing I realized I never asked, and I don't know if it was always the same person. Now all 3 albums, whether it's the same person that has been doing your album artwork. Really have always enjoyed it. The last 2 were kind of this. Gay 90s gothic kind of thing. I'm not sure how exactly to describe the style, but it's I think when you describe yourself as a troubadour, I'm going, yeah, that word goes with that art style. Now this new one has gone space age on us, and it's a very different kind of feel and motif. Is that in some way reflective of a change in your approach musically on the album or whatever? Where does that come from?
I think we've always had this kind of character theme running through, the Baron, it's kind of the overarching, ringmaster, for lack of a better word. And I've had this brilliant collaboration with an artist named Robert Merrick, who's done everything I've ever done. And it's been this just unbelievable relationship where in the past, I've made so many records or done so many things where you bring it into the art department at Atlantic and the guy goes, okay, so we made this pineapple, and it's going to have a laser. And you're like, what are you talking? That has nothing to do with anything that we're trying to do. And Robert is like the first time where I'm like, I can articulate to him in caveman art speak and go, me like man in that. And he listens to the music and creates what I feel is the visualization of the music and where we're at. And the Escapologist was just this idea of transcendence of, escape, literally escaping. What are you escaping? Well, some people are escaping stress. Some people are escaping burdens. Some people are escaping the planet. Some people are escaping, there's just so many different versions of, as we go through life, things that we're trying to, necessarily leave or, and it just seemed to really work thematically with where, the Baron shall float through time and space, and he will show up in all different kinds of places. And we don't have to necessarily make it linear, but we did feel like there was a very, late 1800s, 1900s vibe,
right,
artistically to the first 2. And this one, I think, as a record, has some contemporary themes lyrically and, interesting things. It just felt like the right kind of combination. If that was a long-winded answer that I hope made sense.
It does to me. But yeah, I know there were some things here that you intentionally or otherwise, consciously or otherwise, were doing differently this time around. In particular, and it's funny you bring up Taylor Swift. Like a song like "Stars Collide" kind of popped
out at me, no pun intended, as being kind of very much a pop song vibe. Be careful. If you become Taylor Swift, you are going to be contractually obligated to date a football player.
Hey,
may not want
if I can have that kind of success, nothing's off the table.
Fair enough. But talk about that. Like maybe that song or whatever song, like you seem to be stretching yourself a little bit in terms of your musical approach.
I've always made no bones about being a pop music fan. I mean, I love pop music.
Yeah.
I love hooks. I love that stuff. So The Stars Collide has that kind of, to me, like almost a throwback. It's my version of a Stranger Things interpretation of my youth 80s music or 90s music or synth wave or that kind of thing. So yeah, the record kind of has a lot of moments like that, I think, where I'm trying to, I wouldn't say consciously trying to do it, but I feel as I sit back after it right now looking at it, it kind of bridges that gap between, there's definitely elements that are kind of anchored in the time I'm assuming we both grew up. And then at the same time, I feel like there's I don't want it to be a retro sounding record. I didn't want it to be an old sounding record. I didn't want it to be a classic rock sounding record. Not that there's anything wrong with any of that. I wanted to kind of take those things and bring them forward.
Yeah.
Within my world. And I feel like I'm excited for the record. I think it's kind of it's a condensed, it's a little bit more digestible. We did make, the only thing we consciously thought about is just, we've made 2 double records, which was fairly ambitious. And the world, as much as I find myself unbelievably digestible for hours and hours on end, making a 45-minute or 50-minute record felt like I could maybe, really be a little more focused, as much as we're not focused, but a little more direct and get the message across, and people would have a chance to listen to it maybe more as a whole, even though I know full well most people will break it into singles, and I think it stands like that too. But I didn't want to make the journey a 4.5 hour, I need to block a week of time and just listen to this record,
Fair enough. And I noticed, and that's one of the ways where, despite that entree into the world of progressive rock, you don't necessarily adhere to some of those tropes of progressive rock and the long extended suites and conceptual framework for your songs, or a long, story, which a lot of albums in the last year have come out in that kind of framework where they are telling a story. But that's not you. You have always, I think, been one for the concise composition.
Yeah, I think that, what has anybody done that the Beatles didn't do better?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Ultimately. And to me, I don't edit things. If I felt like I had a 9-minute thing to do that was,
right,
I would never do something 9 minutes that was self-indulgent to the point of watch me play.
Right.
But if I had a 9-minute thing that was serving of a storyline in a song that I felt went that way, I'd have no aversions. Some people could make a sense, it's the case that, a song like Hollow, which is 5+ minutes, or March of the Vicronauts is a long song, that's kind of more on that thing. But yeah, I always keep asking myself, like, get to the point, idiot. Are you making a point? Is this story interesting? Or now you're just trying to find extra words? Are you just trying to show everybody that you know how to do an extra chord? Are you just trying to find another hole to doodle in, without ultimately, I think, to me, it's about storytelling.
Yeah.
And not that some of the classic prog records haven't done brilliant jobs of doing that in a 25-minute thing.
Sure.
But yeah, I'm just always aware of, like, tell the story.
Yeah.
And when you've told the story, close the chapter and go to the next story. Don't try to find ways to add paragraphs for no reason.
Right. And that's why publishing companies employ editors to be able to keep folks on track when they've decided, hey, I'm going to add a couple more paragraphs, and the editor can say, no, we don't need these paragraphs. Let's do something else. I have to agree with you that there are occasions where I hear some songs by some bands. I go, they could use an editor, probably.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, I think it was Stephen King, or I can't remember. I read one of his books on writing or whatever, and he was just talking about, like, you stop, it's about telling a story in the easiest way possible. Stop trying to make, you don't need 15 sentences to say something that you could say emotionally and powerfully in one.
Yeah.
And obviously as musicians, like,
Sure.
You're in the studio now. Studio time is limitless, or recording is this unbelievably limitless thing. So what's more delightful than more of you, and more of you, and you keep feeling like you can do more and more and more and more and more. So yeah, there's an art form to less.
Yeah. The thing I had to laugh about, as you mentioned Stephen King, is the irony of the fact that, as in my mind, I'm thinking about bands that on occasion could use an editor. He was my example of an author who I feel at some point in time, the publishing company went, as Stephen King, just let him write. Don't edit it. Just whatever he puts down. And I go, well, he could use an editor from time to time.
There's been moments.
Now, I'll say this, having noted that I've not read any of his recent works, so he may have perhaps curtailed that habit of his part of sometimes really expounding.
Yeah,
far.
But I mean, I think you it's the track record.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Like, you've written stories consistently that have changed the landscape of that genre.
Yeah.
If you want to blow smoke a little around, you're entitled at some point to do without getting, it's I haven't exactly achieved that level of success yet. So
yeah, it's kind of like, wait, what? You want to insist on having a co-writer join in on the Beatles?
Right.
Don't do it. No, don't do that. Never do that.
Don't really. They got to figure it out.
Yeah. Now, of course, it's always your stream of consciousness. I wish I had a lyric sheet in front of me when I was able to listen to the album, so I followed along as best I could when I could. Fortunately, you usually are a clear singer, but it helps me to read as well. Same reason I'm watching TV with the frickin' closed captioning on all the time anymore. Maybe it's just I'm old, but I'll admit my girlfriend does it too, and she's younger than me. Anyway, the one of them that stood out for me, and I was very curious because it's another one of those kind of trademark attention-grabbing offbeat titles and songs that you are known for. That would be, of course, Zombies and Black Swans. Boy, I'm curious about that combo.
Yes. I don't know that I can articulate it in a way that would make any sense. It just felt like this kind of fever dream.
Mm.
It was just very I'm terrible at explaining my thought process.
Yeah, I know, and I know I kind of put you on the spot because I know you hate to explain songs because I know that takes away the ambiguity of them. Which
great, valid question. I don't hate the question. I hate the fact that I don't have I wish I should.
Yeah.
I wish I had like you had these two characters and they came across, at an Arby's and they couldn't get that. I just wish I had that kind of thing. And I always wish I was the kind of songwriter that, I was just talking about Bruce Springsteen. Like, the guy can write this brilliantly riveting song about a wrench in a garage and how it fit, and it's so clear and it's so precise and there's no ambiguity in it. And it's just so well crafted. And I tend to write more thematically.
Right.
And that's what's always fun, is because when I do hear people start talking about the songs, it's like, oh, wow, I had no idea that they took it that way, or that it, boy, I never drew that, comparison. Yeah. So.
Yeah. I for one am a fan generally of a level of ambiguity in songs, where there's at least something of a picture painted, there's metaphors used, whatever, something where somebody can take it and run with it in the context of their own mind. I can also think of something that I listened to recently with a specific intent for a review, and reading the lyrics and going, okay, you're so ambiguous. I'll be damned. I don't know what the hell you're talking about.
Right.
You might be talking about, I don't know, being defiant about something somewhere someday, but I don't know. A little extra detail would be so handy.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a little bit of a maybe a pop cultural reference to humanity at the moment, being
Right.
zombies and outcasts and
Mm.
strangeness going on and
All right.
things like that.
So it didn't come from a Romero Aronofsky back-to-back movie marathon.
Exactly what it came from.
And that joke only works if I actually got the director correct for the Blood Swan. I think it's Aronofsky.
That's right.
But it's cool. I always dig the intriguing stuff you come up with because you do create mental images and pictures. And I may not always know what inspired them in you, but I do know what they inspire in me. And that
Much to the frightening of my wife, she reads the lyrics back half the time and she's like, "What the hell is wrong with you? You probably need to go see somebody and talk it out." Especially last year when I had songs like "Human Head," and but it was like, it's not something you just sit down and hang out with people. Are like, yeah, here's my thoughts. So when people see that stuff, they're like, "Man, you really, you're kind of. Do I need to worry about being in a room with you?"
Yes, and it's awesome. Please don't get help if it's going to prevent you from writing stuff like that.
Thank you.
I've drawn a line from Scrubs like, "Dear God, you do need help, but God help me, I'm not going to get it for you."
Exactly.
But meanwhile, also on that song, really tasty guitar solo is I know that the orchestra has often been varying degrees of anonymous. I do have a personnel listing this time around provided for me.
Good.
But I also don't know. There was no mention of other guest stars. Do we have another troupe of folks wandering in and out, or how's it?
I've contributed. Andy Blacksugar has been my longtime partner on all the records. He's brilliant. And Edu Kominato, the drummer, has been on a lot of the records with me, and he's another. Those are my kind of core go-to nucleus of partners. We worked with Johan Neiman, I believe is how you pronounce the last name, from Evergrey.
Yeah.
A bass on a song Violent Creatures for us, and it was great to collaborate with him. And then when the liner notes come to you, you'll read the assorted and strange list of additional people that have contributed, twiddled, and twaddled upon the whole record.
Nice. Pseudonyms, actual names this time, or
what would you think I make fake names?
You did use pseudonyms, I think, at least in the first album or two, where you said, "Well, so and so was actually this," but
it's a very little known inside joke that I was such a fan. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but there's a show called Toast of London.
I know the name,
which was Matt Berry, who you might know from What We Do in the Shadows.
Yeah, I love that show.
So he did a show in England which won BAFTAs, and it's called Toast of London. And the running theme throughout the show is that there's these absolutely insane names, like constantly dropped all the time. And I just fell in love with that concept. Yeah. So as much fun as I have making music and as much fun as I have doing all that stuff, it is equally my favorite time when I get to sit down and invent these insane names and especially with there's journalists who don't dig quite as deeply and don't realize it. So when I hear about, in a review or they start talking about all these other musicians, it's just a great joy.
Yeah.
To spread misinformation in my own way.
Fair enough. And that fits you. That totally fits the whole mise en scene.
Thank you.
Practicing my French for April.
I was going to make the joke. I didn't know you spoke Spanish.
Thanks. Neither do I. I know enough Spanish to basically do some basic greetings and start a fight.
Those are the two most important things.
Well, sure. Greet them and then fight them. Short-term relationships that way. So I'm curious, because I know there's often stories about what goes on in the studio in the course of making any album. There's almost always something interesting, but not always. But I'm curious, any snafus, any difficulties, weird things you ran into while you were trying to make this album?
I make these albums mostly, I make, from my perspective, my parts of it all are done completely in isolation.
Yeah.
So, and I find myself delightful and on point at all times. So I very rarely find myself, doing anything hard. No, I wish I had this great story of strangeness or anything like that. I mean, I tend to, again, like given a normal day, I mostly just get up and go to the studio and work. So it's every day for me. That's the way I'd spend my days, unless I'm doing something out on the road, or I'm doing something with Jeff Scott Soto, or doing the Monsters of Rock cruise or whatever, things like that. Like other than that, I mean, I'm generally in the studio every day working on stuff.
Yeah.
And like I said, in the old days when we used to all get together and spend 6 weeks making a record as a group or a bunch of people with the crew, you'd be more apt to have these fantastic stories. For me, I'm in my own world and I like it. And the voices in my head don't bother me, and I just sit there all day long and we argue and make music.
There you go. Yeah, there's a certain zen to that in many ways. And I in my head, I'm always kind of curious to what degree that approach to album making, music making, and recording would be with us now if it were not for the pandemic forcing the adaptation, or whether it was inevitable anyway and just might have gotten there just as quickly, or maybe somewhere down the road. It's an interesting thing there, though, where you've got people in different locations, but you'd never know that that's how it was recorded.
I found it to be, I mean, first of all, I've always written and done stuff by myself. So that, I mean, even when it was more primitive recording stuff, I always I was always doing that myself. So that wasn't a new experience for me. But I think in my case, because of the type of personality I'm in, because of the vision I have and the way I create things, I'm a nightmare to be in a room with. So I think it's been a blessing to send a song idea to Devin Townsend or to Bumblefoot or to Butch Walker or to Johan or any of these guys. And then they get, or Andy for that matter, and Adu, they get to fully realize their interpretations without me being in the room, without that everybody hates it as a musician. You're in there, you're trying to work up a part, and then you just sense out of the corner of your eye, like the engineer just going, and then everything's shot. So this removes that from the equation, and you get these fully realized, contributions from these brilliant musicians. And that's the game's won or lost there. If you ask, Clint Lowry or Bumblefoot to do something on a record, let them do what they do.
Yeah.
You're not picking somebody who can't do something brilliant. Yeah. And that's been a winning recipe for me is, I find tremendous success removing me from their life.
So you don't Robert Fripp them is what you're saying.
No, I do not.
And no offense to Robert Fripp out there anywhere if he comes across this, but
it works brilliantly for him, but I think that's because I make these records and I write them and I'm so involved in that aspect of it. I think it's really important to get other input and takes and depth, because like you were talking about the guitar textures or this or that, it's like that's what gives these records a more depth and width,
right?
And has, I think it makes it more interesting than just, not that I don't think the songs are good, but I mean, I think that for me, that makes it, it goes from like, a low res thing to like a widescreen IMAX thing where I'm like, all these other cool things are happening now. And it's not just all from one perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. And that for me, that collaboration process is really what results in some really good music, that it's all those contributing factors, and and you can see how that can really make a whole that oftentimes is greater than the sum of its parts, if I can coin a phrase.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it was even fun watching that Beatles documentary when, you're just watching them write some of these amazing, and you're like watching the collaborate, and you're watching like, oh, that's terrible. And, this is, and then, the way they were kind of dismissive of George's ideas. And, and then you realize the riff he was working on was like, I can't remember what it was, like, wait, something in the way she moves. You're like, they're blowing off, like, of all these things. But yeah, it's definitely, I mean, it's the push and pull that makes it.
Yeah, certainly. So meanwhile, then, of course, the curious question I've always got, and I know, how easy is it, how possible is it to take the act on the road?
We're definitely planning on doing it this year. I mean, that's the goal. We've wanted to build something so we can do it with the musicians that I want to do it with.
Yeah.
not that I'm on any old guy anti-tracks, screaming about that. But I would like, I want to be able to bring the musicians that I want to be able to bring and do it in a way that I think the music has deserved. And we've built a good head of steam and been very fortunate to build a bit of a base that seems to be growing. And I think this year is going to be the year where we can take it out and do some shows.
You made a lot of people very excited right there, myself included, because I would love that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and not that I also wouldn't love another opportunity to see you and Jeff Scott Soto doing your thing, because that is quite a fun little show that you guys do.
Yeah, it's been something that's just been this organic thing that's grown into something that's just been, no stress, really rewarding, and it's he's I would like the story. Right? We've been friends forever, and it's just been to be able to call him up and go like, hey, let's go to Chicago, let's do this, or let's go to Nashville, or let's we're doing the Monsters of Rock cruise next month with Extreme, who've been lifelong friends, and the Queensryche guys, and you get to have that open those doors and make that a possibility. It's just been unbelievably fun, and we're doing more coming up. So
that is super cool. So I was say, if you can maybe plan to be speaking of Roy on the cruise to the Edge next year, do that as well. That might be the year I finally make it.
Yeah, that I've been Larry has been talking to me about the potential of that at some point, and maybe next year.
Excellent. That would be awesome. Absolutely. So there we go. I guess for the most part, that's all there is to hear for the moment. But I am curious.
Nothing about my skincare routine. Nothing about.
Do I look like I need a skincare routine? Like it's going to die there.
You must listen. Man.
It's mostly similar to a baseball mitt for me. But I am curious. I what is it? Because you mentioned, you're a pop fan, so you're kind of got a foot in this prog world thing, but you've got your roots in, I guess we'll say hair metal, because if you're on to the Monsters of Rock, that's what that is. But what are you listening to these days? Because I'm sure I'm not the only one that's curious that what is playing in the Bieler household.
Well, first of all, I've been listening to the new Opeth record, which I think is brilliant.
Yeah.
Been listening to the new Devin Townsend record, which I can't get enough of him. Yeah. I've been listening to I'm looking through my stuff right here because I just was reading there was a Japanese lady who I just thought the world of, and I can't Eiko, I'm gonna murder her last name. Eiko Ishibashi.
Oh. Ishibashi.
Really brilliant.
Wow.
I've always listened to the Haken guys, and there's just a ton of great new music out all the time. I'm always a victim to release week and who just did what and where. But yeah, those Opeth guys killed it.
Oh, it's my favorite album of theirs since Goes to Perdition.
Yeah,
it's a great blend of something that's just perfectly gothy and about the way only Opeth can do it.
Yeah, I feel so bad because I'd heard about them for years, and I was aware of them and wasn't sure if they were like a kind of goat sacrificing black and white makeup band. I just didn't know. And then about 3 or 4 years, whenever it came out, the Inacauda Venent, I can't even say it, but that, I was like, oh my God, this is almost maybe the best band in the world. And fell in love with them then, and then the new record doesn't disappoint at all. And like I said, Devin's always doing super challenging, interesting. It's kind of funny the way Power Nerd came out because that song specifically, it's such a throwback to his youth, but it's like there's such a Skid Row-ish underpinning to that, kind of 80s, 90s rock. That first song, if you listen to the riff, but then you have a song on that record, I think it's Ubilia or whatever, which is just unreal.
Yeah,
like some of the best stuff he's ever done. So he's a guy who goes anywhere and challenges himself. And just when he has success doing something super heavy, he'll do an ambient thing. And the second, he has success there, you're going to do something completely. It's always flipping the script. But that's to me what makes it compelling. Listen.
Yeah. Devin is a shapeshifter. Funny story. If you got a moment, I could tell you about Opeth and my first discovery of them. This is way back. This is MySpace days. When, for whatever reason, at that moment, I was in maybe call it a midlife crisis, maybe call it post-divorce rebirth. I like that second term best. But I was getting suddenly into music like I hadn't done for a while and discovering a whole bunch of things. The download days helped me a good bit with that. And of course, I had a MySpace account briefly. And you would do the thing like you would get to be friends, get to be friends. You would friend the bands out there. And of course, being, big on Rush and things like that, I remember, get on there and you could see who they were friends with. And oftentimes with all those other artists. Well, there was a band, I don't know if they're still around, if they're still recording, called OTEP.
I remember that.
OTEP, yes, is a very screamy female-fronted metal band.
Like a new metal thing of some sort.
Well, I guess maybe they qualified as new metal, did they?
Yeah. If I remember correctly.
Yeah, I remember it didn't go for it, but then I remember seeing Rush is friends with this OPEP, and I'm thinking OTEP, and I'm going, wait, what? The fuck? Rush is into OTEP? I must have missed something. Maybe I clearly need to listen to this band over again. And I think at that point, same thing with Porcupine Tree. I saw them have Opeth on there. I'm going, hold a moment. What's happening? And then I finally realized, oh, wait, not OTEP, Opeth.
Big difference.
A little bit. Oh, small bit.
Such a great band, though.
Yeah.
I mean, there's, people can complain all they want, but I think there's so many artists that are inspiring and are challenging and, trying new things and pushing the envelope and in interesting ways and, not necessarily emulating anybody else, doing their own path. And those are the bands that I just find myself, I think over time gravitating towards.
Yeah. Yeah. That's me. I realize in many ways, and sounds like you're in a similar boat, that unlike most people my age, I haven't, my collecting of music and exploration of music didn't stop a couple of years after I got out of college. I'm not still listening to the same stuff over and over again. I'm continually looking for something new, something different. And then in a lot of ways, to a certain extent, the more different, the better.
Well, that's the interesting thing I think about music in general is like, it's so funny how records sometimes find you later, even like, records that I didn't get in the, when they came out. Bowie's a classic artist of that. Like, dude, like when the Let's Dance record came out, I was like, what is this?
Yeah.
Like, it's just hit me. It wasn't, and then like now I love that record or, even going to stuff like the Stones, which I never got before. Like it's funny how you have to be open at the right time in your life. And then those records all of a sudden like hit you the right way. And it's like, oh, I totally get this now. Like I don't know what I was thinking before, but I just didn't get it, and that's what's kind of great about music. It's not like the record changed, you did.
Right. Yeah. I've had that experience once or twice. The most classic I can think of is a little band called I Mother Earth, Scenery and Fish. Picked it up simply because their lead singer contributed to Alex Lifeson's Victor project. So I'm like, oh, wait, check this out. And listened to it the first time. I went, Then like put it away for like a year, pulled it out again, listened to it, and went, Put it away for another year again, pulled it out, went, dude, this is awesome.
Right. It just depends on how it catches you.
Yeah, it really did. So, yeah. So it's kind of similar to your second life, so to speak, here in the music biz. The time was ready for you. Finally.
Like that, where the hell has everybody been? That'll be my...
You were advanced, my friend. You were way ahead of them.
Oh, that world's close. Unfortunately, only by 15 seconds. Not.
Well, yeah. At least while you were alive, too.
Is that? I'm not into this whole. I want to be discovered 200 years from now as a genius. Screw that. I'd rather be mildly relevant now than a legend later on.
There you go. Well, you're ahead of me on that too. So,
thank you.
All right. Friend. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your time. It's great talking to you again, and I look forward to the next time I see you.
Absolutely. I'll have to release more music sooner now so we can have a chat.
You got it. Bingo. Well, good luck with the album. I'm sure this one will do as easily as well as any of the other ones. You are a very consistent artist, if nothing else.
I appreciate that, my friend. Thank you so much.
Good luck. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care.
All right. So that is Jason's story, and he is sticking to it. The latest album from Jason Bieler and the Baron Von Bielski Orchestra is entitled The Escapologist. It comes out February 21st. And pre-orders are being taken. You can get yours in at the link I included in the description below. Meanwhile, of course, a big thank you to Jason Bieler himself for joining me. Jason, I appreciate it. Always a pleasure to talk to you, brother. You have achieved a status held by only 2 other humans on this planet. The other 2 are Ross Jennings and Charlie Griffiths, both of Haken, coincidentally. And that status is you are the 3 people who have appeared on my show 3 times. So, hey, great deal there, dude. I will send you a prize in the mail real soon, of course. Anyway, thank you, brother. It's always good to talk to you. I wish you the best in life and, of course, for the album. And I hope to see you on tour later this year, or, hey, maybe even sooner this year, whichever comes first. And, hey, thank you to all of you watching. I appreciate you coming along for the ride. I hope you enjoyed the interview. If you like this and you want to see my album reviews and song reactions and, hey, other occasional interviews, you know what to do. Just hit that subscribe button. Meanwhile, next up on the slate from me is my review of probably the most anticipated prog album this year. That would be Dream Theater's Parasomnia, featuring the return of one Mike Portnoy. Kind of a big deal. Meanwhile, I leave you with this. Never fear to deviate from the norm, and as always, keep it proggy.